It was September 2009. A man walked into a Beverly Hills pawn shop. He placed an item on the counter. The pawnbroker looked down. It was a World Series championship ring. The man who handed it over had earned it 23 years earlier. He had hit the home run that changed the series. Now he needed the cash. He walked out with $56,762. He got back in his car. That car was also where he slept. 3 years before that morning, this man had everything. A mansion worth $18 million in California wine country. A private Gulfstream jet. A business empire he valued at $60 million. And a national audience that was paying him for financial advice. So how does that happen? How does a World Series champion, a 3-time All-Star, a man the financial media called a genius, end up pawning his ring for cash? And what does the answer tell you about the money in your own life? This is the story of Lenny Dykstra. By the end of it, you will understand something about success and about self-deception that most people never learn until it is already too late. Lenny Dykstra was born in 1963 in Santa Ana, California. His father left when Lenny was 4 years old. He grew up in Garden Grove, a working-class suburb outside Anaheim. There was not much money. There was not much stability. But there was baseball. Lenny decided, early and completely, that baseball was his way out. He was not the most gifted athlete in any room. He was 5'10". He was listed at 160 pounds as a young man. What he had instead was something harder to measure. He simply refused to lose. He fouled off pitches no one else would foul off. He ran into walls. He played through broken bones. A teammate once said, "He had no concept of failure." The New York Mets took a chance on him in the 1981 draft. He worked through the minor leagues, grinding. By 1985, he was in the big leagues at 22 years old. He had punched his ticket out of Garden Grove. The 1986 New York Mets are remembered as one of the most dangerous teams in baseball history. They were loaded with talent and overflowing with confidence. Dykstra fit perfectly. In Game 3 of the 1986 National League Championship Series, the Mets were facing elimination. 1 out, bottom of the 9th, 2 on, down by a run. Lenny Dykstra stepped to the plate. He hit a walk-off home run. The Mets did not lose that series. Weeks later, they won the World Series. Lenny Dykstra was 23 years old, and he was a champion. But the best was still to come. After a trade to the Philadelphia Phillies in 1989, Dykstra became something bigger. He became the heart of that city. In 1993, he put together one of the great leadoff seasons in baseball history. He led the major leagues in runs scored with 143. He led in hits. He led in walks. He finished second in National League MVP voting behind only Barry Bonds. The Phillies went to the World Series. Dykstra hit .348 in that series. He had earned roughly $36 million in baseball salary over his career. He retired in 1996 at 33. His body worn down by a decade of playing harder than the game required. But Lenny Dykstra did not know how to slow down. After baseball, he moved to Southern California. He opened a luxury car wash, then another, then another. He called his flagship location the Taj Mahal. The business worked. By 2006, the car wash operation was generating serious cash. Then something interesting happened. Jim Cramer, the famous television personality and founder of TheStreet.com, became convinced that Dykstra had a gift for picking stocks. He offered Dykstra a column. Subscribers paid nearly $1,000 a year for Dykstra's investment advice. Dykstra sold his car wash business to investors in 2007. With that money, a new persona was born. Not just a baseball star, not just a businessman, a financial genius. By 2009, Lenny Dykstra told anyone who would listen that his personal net worth was approaching $60 million. He was not a long shot from Garden Grove anymore. He was untouchable, or so he believed. In 2007, Dykstra made a decision that would define everything that followed. He bought Wayne Gretzky's estate in Sherwood Country Club, California. The price was $14 million. The house was nearly 14,000 square feet. It sat on the first fairway of one of the most exclusive clubs in the state. To Dykstra, this was not reckless. This was the next level. Here is what no one saw clearly at the time. Dykstra bought that mansion in early 2007. The mortgage market collapsed months later. He also launched a glossy magazine called The Players Club, a lifestyle and investment guide targeted at professional athletes. He threw a lavish launch party at the Mandarin Oriental Hotel in New York City. The guest list was real. The confidence was real. The financial foundation beneath it was not. The magazine was bleeding money from the first issue. His accountant, hired in 2006, later described his spending habits in precise terms. If there were two marble samples for the floor, identical in appearance, Dykstra would choose the more expensive one. Every time. Not for quality, for price. Because to Dykstra, expensive meant successful. And successful was the only thing he knew how to be. Behind closed doors, a darker picture was forming. He allegedly pressured employees to hand over their personal credit cards, with promises of repayment that never came. One employee's card was charged over $30,000 in a single private jet flight. His son Cutter signed an MLB contract with a $700,000 bonus. That money later went missing. Lenny claimed he had invested it and lost it. The Players Club died after 7 issues. Dykstra's wife Terry filed for divorce. His Gulfstream jet was impounded in Cleveland after he failed, to pay $228,000 in maintenance costs. In March 2009, foreclosure papers were filed on the Gretzky mansion. What happened next was not a slow collapse. It was a cliff edge. On July 7, 2009, Lenny Dykstra filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. The man who had publicly claimed a $60 million net worth listed less than $50,000 in assets. His total debts were between $30 and $50 million. The distance between those two numbers is not a typo. It is the full measure of the deception. Both the one the world believed and the one Dykstra may have told himself. The Gretzky mansion was gone. His other property in Westlake Village, gone. By August 2009, Dykstra was living out of his car. 1 month later, he walked into that Beverly Hills pawn shop with his 1986 World Series ring, the same ring he had earned with the walk-off home run, the ring he had carried for 23 years. It sold for $56,762. But the financial collapse was only part of the story. Federal investigators moved in. They alleged that after filing for bankruptcy, after the courts had frozen his assets, Dykstra had continued stripping the Gretzky mansion. He allegedly removed, hid, and sold over $400,000 worth of property. That legally belonged to the bankruptcy estate. Among the items taken, a custom sink worth $50,000 ripped from the walls. He sold memorabilia at consignment shops and laundered the cash through a check written in someone else's name. He lied under oath during bankruptcy hearings. In 2012, Lenny Dykstra pleaded guilty to federal charges of bankruptcy fraud, concealment of assets, and money laundering. He was sentenced to 6.5 months in federal prison. His only documented income at the time of sentencing was a $5,700 monthly pension from Major League Baseball. The man who had charged subscribers nearly $1,000 a year for investment wisdom was surviving on a pension check. The house Wayne Gretzky had built, the one Dykstra had bought as a symbol of his arrival, was eventually repurchased by the Gretzkys themselves in 2018 for $13.5 million. The mansion that was supposed to announce Lenny Dykstra to the world returned to the family it had always really belonged to. Studying this story, 3 things stand out. The first is the difference between confidence and competence. Dykstra was genuinely talented at reading baseball. He had real instincts in business. The car washes were profitable. But those skills did not automatically transfer to financial advising, magazine publishing, or real estate speculation. He never stopped to ask whether his confidence was justified in each new arena. He simply assumed it was. That assumption cost him everything. The second is the relationship between spending and earning. Dykstra never connected those two things. His accountant described a man who tracked daily revenue obsessively, but paid no attention to what was going out. He always chose the more expensive option. That pattern does not have to reach his scale to destroy you. In quieter form, it lives in millions of American households right now. The third is the danger of the mask. At the height of his post-baseball career, Dykstra was performing the image of wealth, more than he was building it. The jet, the mansion, the magazine, the financial column. These were not the infrastructure of wealth. They were the costume of it. And the costume was funded with debt. By the time that debt became visible, there was no wealth behind the mask to pay it back. Lenny Dykstra suffered a major stroke in 2024. He lives quietly now in Pennsylvania. The baseball highlights still exist. The 1986 walk-off, the 1993 MVP race, the World Series rings, the ones that survived. But the story that followed those moments is the one worth studying, because Lenny Dykstra never stopped believing he was exceptional. He was, on a baseball field. That belief is what carried him out of Garden Grove, and it is exactly what destroyed him when the game was over. The most dangerous financial mistake is not ignorance. It is the certainty that you are the exception. If this story made you think differently about money, share it with someone who needs to hear it.